The grand concert hall sparkled under golden lights filled with loud, roaring applause as Victor Lang, the world-famous pianist, took his final bow. His fingers had moved over the piano keys with such skill that the crowd was left breathless. Backstage, a quiet figure waited, her heart pounding. 14-year-old Emma, blind since birth, stood with her white cane shaking in her hand. She had listened closely to every note of Victor's music, feeling each sound deep in her soul. To her, music wasn't just something to hear. It was a world she could see with her heart. As Victor walked by, Emma gathered her courage. "Mr. Lang," she said softly, "I want to play like you someday." He stopped, turned, and looked her over. His smile faded into a sneer. "You want to play like me?" he said loudly, making sure others nearby could hear. "Music isn't for people who can't even see the keys." A few crew members chuckled at his cruel words. Emma's face turned red. She lowered her head, trying to hide how much it hurt. There were no tears, but the pain stung just the same. Victor walked away, enjoying the laughter he left behind. Emma stood alone in that hallway, her dream shaken, but still alive. No one knew that her ears noticed more than most eyes ever could. That moment didn't crush her, it lit a fire. While others laughed, a quiet strength began to grow inside her. She didn't want anyone's pity, she didn't want to get even, she wanted one thing, to let her music say what words couldn't. Deep inside, she made a promise. One day, the world would hear her and remember her name. The concert hall grew quiet again, the applause long gone. In a dim corner backstage, Emma sat alone on a bench, her cane resting beside her, hands tight in her lap. Victor's words still echoed in her head, and she struggled to swallow the lump in her throat. Then came soft footsteps and the sound of a mop sliding across the floor. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly janitor with kind eyes and a worn-out cap, noticed her sitting there. He leaned his mop against the wall and walked over slowly. "Tough night?" he asked gently. Emma nodded, unable to speak. He sat next to her without saying more, letting the silence rest between them. Then he said, "Don't listen to him." His voice was quiet but firm. "I used to be a jazz pianist, not famous, but I played with heart. Lost it all after my hands got hurt in an accident. But I still remember the music, and I hear it in you." Emma turned her head toward him, confused but interested. "If you want," he went on, "I can teach you, not like those fancy schools. I'll teach you how to feel the beat, trust your ears, and let your hands follow your heart." That night, something special began. After hours, when the hall was empty and silent, Mr. Jenkins would hum melodies and guide Emma's fingers across the keys. With every note, she learned to listen more deeply, to hear the quiet spaces between sounds, and to trust her sense of touch. He'd sweep the floor with one hand and gently adjust her posture with the other. Slowly, beautifully, Emma didn't just learn to play, she learned how to speak through music. Months passed. Winter covered the city in white. Inside the same grand concert hall, excitement filled the air. It was time for Young Talent Night, the yearly event for up-and-coming performers. One name on the list stood out, Ert. No photo, no bio, just a note. Self-taught pianist. The judges were curious. The special guest that evening? None other than Victor Lang. Emma waited quietly, her hair neatly braided, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from excitement. She had practiced night after night, pouring her heart into every chord. Not even Mr. Jenkins knew she had signed up for the show. When the announcer called out, "Ert!" a wave of whispers moved through the crowd. Emma stepped onto the stage, her cane tapping gently on the shiny floor. Gasps echoed across the room. Victor Lang, sitting in the front row, straightened up. His eyes narrowed. He recognized her. Leaning toward the host, he muttered, "Is this some kind of joke?" Emma sat at the grand piano, placing her cane beside the bench. For a moment, the room went completely still. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft and searching, but they quickly grew stronger, full of life and feeling. Her fingers glided with grace, each note filled with emotion. Only someone who had known real pain could play like that. The melody told a story, one of struggle, strength, and beauty. The crowd leaned in, drawn to her music. She had no sheet music, no visual guides, just pure sound coming straight from her heart. Victor's smirk slowly vanished. His eyes widened. The man who had once laughed at her now leaned forward, breath held. Not because he was embarrassed, but because he was in awe. Emma didn't need to see the keys. She had become the music. As her hands moved across the piano, it felt like time stood still. The gentle beginning gave way to waves of emotion, each note building and crashing over the audience like a storm. No one moved. No one dared to even breathe too loudly. The music wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. It cried and celebrated. It remembered pain and offered hope. Tears fell down faces in the crowd. Strangers held hands without thinking. Even the people who had doubted her at first now sat frozen, their hearts breaking open with every sound. Emma wasn't just playing, she was letting her souls speak. Victor Lang stayed completely still. His proud posture slowly faded. He couldn't take his eyes off Emma, the girl he once dismissed, now owning the stage he used to rule. Something inside him shifted. A crack appeared in the image of himself he'd always admired. As the final note rang out into silence, Victor stood slowly. The crowd sat stunned. Then one by one they rose. Applause broke out, soft at first, then like thunder. Cheers filled the hall. Victor stepped forward, his face pale, hands shaking. Emma turned slightly toward the sound of his steps, her face calm, her body steady. He reached her and paused, struggling for words. "I was wrong," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't need eyes to see the soul of music." Emma gave a small, peaceful smile, not one of victory, but of understanding. The music had said everything for her, and the world had listened. The applause kept going, wave after wave of cheers and tears filling the hall. People stood in amazement, shaken by the girl who had entered quietly with a cane and left them breathless with her soul. Emma sat for a moment longer, her hands resting gently on the keys. Her head tilted slightly as if she were listening, not to the crowd, but to something deeper. Then came the silence. A silence filled with respect and wonder. She stood slowly, turned toward the sound and gave a quiet, graceful bow. But her smile wasn't for the claps or attention. It was for the journey, for every hour spent practicing alone, every word that had once tried to break her spirit. She had made it, not by chasing fame, but by staying true to the music she loved. Offstage, in the shadows, Mr. Jenkins stood with his cap held to his chest, eyes shimmering. A single tear rolled down his cheek, not from sadness, but from pride. He had seen her fall, and now he saw her rise. Victor Lang stepped aside as Emma walked past, nodding with real respect. No words were needed. As the lights dimmed and the crowd slowly left, the narrator's voice returned, soft, thoughtful, and full of meaning. Sometimes the world doesn't need more words. It needs the courage of a heart that never gave up. Emma didn't just play music, she became its voice. And in doing so, she reminded everyone what it truly means to see.